It's 1991, the weekend of my 13th birthday, and I go with my father and one of my brothers, hi Rob, to see the long-awaited sequel to Highlander. Even at that age, I can tell the movie is a lot of nonsense, and when we walk out, my dad says something like, "Why would Sean Connery do that?" I don't know about Zardoz yet, so I don't answer him, but the disappointment we all feel is palpable. It is so bad that I go on to never watch any of the subsequent sequels. That is, until I start a YouTube channel and start talking about the original Highlander. I guess curiosity finally got the best of me. So I went in expecting all of these movies, and yes, I'm including the anime, to be hot garbage. And I'm the kind of weird cinema sadist who watched all the direct-to-video Hellraiser sequels in 1 week, and I didn't think the Highlander movies could be that bad. At the risk of spoiling the rest of this video, I'll say I was right. Most of these are better than Highlander 2. There is one that is worse though, but we'll get to that. First, let's talk about the sequel that killed my interest in the entire franchise when I was just barely a teenager. This sequel takes place in the far-flung future of 2024, where Connor MacLeod has grown old as a scientist or a philanthropist or something, and dedicated his life to a shield that covers the Earth because the ozone layer got depleted and killed Brenda. After getting drunk at a bar, and at the exact same time he is discovered by Virginia Madsen, who plays a sexy eco-terrorist without any identifiable character traits, beings from another world in the distant past arrive to kill Connor for reasons. You see, we discover that the Immortals are actually aliens who have been punished for rebelling against something and making enemies with General Katana, played by Michael Ironside. After killing the aliens who came to destroy him, Connor gets his immortality back and celebrates by having alleyway sex with the terrorist he just met. He also shouts Ramirez's name, again for reasons, and so Sean Connery's Ramirez returns from the dead in the middle of Scotland, with the only in-universe explanation for his resurrection being quote-unquote magic. So, blah blah blah, Katana shows up on Earth and goes to war with Connor, but naturally disappears in the middle of their fight because it's not the climax of the movie yet. Then Connor, Ramirez, and Virginia Madsen, whose character name is so forgettable I don't remember it, decide that they need to destroy the shield because the ozone layer has fixed itself. And so they go to the giant mega corporation that is keeping the shield in business and get all terroristy. Ramirez is forced to sacrifice himself to his biggest fan, Virginia Madsen gets to shoot a gun, and then there's a final fight between Connor and Katana at the base of a giant skybeam. So, yeah, this movie is wild, and the plot makes the original seem more coherent and grounded by comparison. Now look, I can appreciate a sequel that goes in a bold new direction, but this sequel retains so little DNA from the original that it should have been its own thing, like Total Recall crossed with Lethal Weapon or something like that. However, even on its own merits, it's poorly made, with cheap-looking sets, badly edited action scenes, tonal inconsistencies that feel schizophrenic, and poorly integrated effects. If I have to say something positive about it, I will say the actors are clearly having a good time, especially Connery and Ironside, and I actually think Lambert fits better into his role this time around. Otherwise though, this movie is, for lack of a better word, just terrible. It was so bad, in fact, that the subsequent sequels pretend it doesn't exist. Highlander 3 feels more like a traditional sequel to the first movie, because it is a direct continuation of the events of the first film and roughly follows the same formula, all without bringing time-traveling aliens and the ozone layer into the mix. In the past, after the death of his wife Heather, Connor traveled to Japan to seek training from Nakano, an immortal with powers of illusion who is played by Mako, only to have said training interrupted by Kane, a powerful Genghis Khan-style immortal who is basically just the Kurgan again, as played by Mario Van Peebles. Nakano makes Connor flee and then sacrifices himself, so that the inevitable quickening will cause the mountain they are in to cave in, trapping Kane and his minions for 400 years. In the present, it's been 7 or 8 years since the fight between Connor and the Kurgan, and Connor is now traveling the world with his adopted son, John Plot Device McCloud. In Japan, an excavation unearths Kane, and at that moment, Connor feels the call of the gathering and decides to go to New York, leaving John behind with a friend. There he meets up with Alex, a sexy archaeologist who has been tracking him, and the same archaeologist who accidentally let Kane loose. She also looks identical to somebody he fell in love with during the French Revolution, but that goes completely unexplained. I think they just included it so they could have more flashbacks in which Christopher Lambert actually speaks French. We learn that in this timeline, Brenda died in a car accident 1 year after the end of the last movie, but that Connor seemingly still had his immortality because he walked away without a scratch. So, blah blah blah, we get some Skinamax softcore between Connor and Alex, Kane kidnaps John, and there's a final fight in some kind of metalworks factory or something. Kane has Mako's illusion powers, but they eventually fail him and Connor wins, is reunited with his son, and then literally drives into the sunset with Alex. With its vastly reduced budget and status as a mostly direct-to-video sequel, this definitely isn't high cinema. The pace drags on in the middle, the final fight ends too abruptly, the music and effects are pure cheese, and the directing is very workhorse. But compared to Highlander 2, this might as well be the Citizen Kane of Highlander sequels. You see what I did there? Kane? Never mind. I like Mario Van Peebles hamming it up, though it's confusing how up-to-date he is on pop culture for a guy who's been underground for 400 years, and I think Christophe Lambert has gotten really comfortable in his role as Connor, with even his accent improving dramatically between films.
I know he's alive, and I have to find him.
Highlander 3 is a movie that knows what it is and just goes for it, and as such, it's tonally consistent and easy to enjoy if you turn your brain off and get out the popcorn. Don't be afraid to fast forward through the middle, though. So, full disclosure, I've never seen the Highlander TV series, so this was my introduction to Adrian Paul's Duncan MacLeod. Highlander Endgame starts with Duncan and Connor meeting up in New York moments before Connor's apartment is destroyed with Rachel in it. You remember her? Connor is so devastated by all the losses in his life that he goes into hiding in this place called the Sanctuary, where volunteering immortals are basically kept on ice. Now, because we're bringing in the television series continuity, the world has suddenly become overrun with immortals, and there is a group of them, led by a guy named Jacob Kell, who go into Sanctuary and kill everyone except Connor, who they leave alive because Kell has been torturing Connor for centuries, revealing that he is responsible for all the loss he's faced throughout his life, including most recently Brenda and Rachel. Meanwhile, Duncan goes looking for Connor and discovers that his own ex-wife, also an immortal, is working for Kell. Blah blah blah, Connor fails to kill Kell, Duncan winds up having to kill Connor, and then Duncan faces Kell one-on-one in the climax. Endgame is the movie that made me think I underestimated the Highlander sequels. On the whole, it's not that bad. In fact, I might even call it pretty good. Sure, it feels like the finale of a television series, because, well, it is. And the visual effects are embarrassingly bad late 90s, early noughts pixel vomit. Especially when they try to superimpose Connor's face into Duncan's in the end. Looks bad. There's also plenty of melodrama, choppy action editing and hokey acting, but the movie is still very earnest, delivering a sequel that honors at least the original film and probably the series too, though obviously I can't speak on that. The story deals with a lot of the themes of the original story, most notably the ennui of immortality, and adds in a lot of new ways of looking at them, especially when it comes to the relationship between Duncan and his ex. Heck, this is the first time I've personally ever encountered a female immortal in this universe, so that's cool. But the thing that probably blew me away the most was the fighting. Adrian Paul is clearly a more well-trained martial artist than Christopher Lambert, and he is able to stand toe-to-toe with Donnie friggin' Yen in this movie. Yeah, Donnie Yen is in this, and he kicks ass. That was a pleasant surprise.
That's right, Donnie Yen shows up in Highlander Endgame. You know what that means? That means that the Martial Arts Film Freak has something to say. The Martial Arts Film Freak is back on the Unapologetic Geek YouTube channel so we can geek out unapologetically about some kung fu. And it's some good kung fu. Not only does Donnie Yen get to show up and have two pretty good fight scenes, he's also the martial arts coordinator for this entire movie. And it makes sense, because if you look at some of the scenes that aren't as good as his scenes, they're still pretty decent because Donnie Yen is behind the helm. And it makes sense. This movie came out in the year 2000. That means it would have been filmed in like 1999, 1998. That is prime Hong Kong handover. That is prime death of the Hong Kong film industry. There's a reason we get stuff like Rumble in the Bronx, or Rush Hour, or The Matrix, or even Sammo Hung's TV show Martial Law. Go back and watch that, it's really good, and also watch that intro sequence. It's very 90s, very cheesy, and I love it very much. But all these things happened at the same time in Hollywood because the film industry in Hong Kong in that late 90s period was dying due to the Hong Kong handover, when the UK was handing Hong Kong back over to China. It really threw an imbalance in their whole film industry, and a lot of people were like, I'm getting out of here. Even Chow Yun-fat was hopping over on the Replacement Killers, and Michelle Yeoh became a Bond girl who could kick all your asses. So of course Donnie Yen comes over to Hollywood. He not only works on Blade 2, where he gets that small, teeny tiny little role, as well as the fight choreographer and martial arts coordinator on Blade 2, he has to come over and pop over to the Highlander franchise, where he gets one of the best fight scenes in this entire franchise. That's right, I don't care. The first movie, the second movie, the third movie, the TV show, the fourth movie of 2007, was that the fourth or the fifth? I don't remember, but it is definitively, in my opinion, which is definitive, one of the best fight scenes in this entire franchise. Donnie Yen pops up with his Quan Dao ready to throw Quan down. He comes in looking like $1 million, but not only that, he makes Adrian Paul look like $1 million. When a fight scene is this good, it can't just be one party. This isn't pro wrestling where Bret Hart can make one guy who doesn't know how to wrestle look like $1 million. No, both parties actually have to be good, and you could tell both parties were good because the camera wasn't cutting away. Adrian Paul was standing on business, going one-on-one with Donnie Yen, and it was great. Watching him defend against Donnie Yen was incredible. I could not look away. Honestly, Donnie Yen is doing amazing stuff with his Quan Dao. His offense, his skills with that weapon are incredible. He's a lifelong wushu practitioner, it makes sense. But I'm watching Adrian Paul and I'm thinking, hold on. His defense, his skills, his movement, everything he's doing is good, and it looks natural. Which just made me curious about this Adrian Paul guy. I don't know him outside of the Highlander films. He doesn't go on and make a whole bunch of amazing martial arts films. Who is he? What's his background? So I have to Google him. I have to do some research. And it turns out he has a background in Taekwondo, which doesn't make sense for this. It's a lot of the kicking. It's a lot of the movement down there. He doesn't do a lot of that here. However, he does also have a background in Choi Li Foot and Hung Gar, two incredible kung fu forms, which makes sense. And I find out that, of course, he's already been in this franchise for a movie and a TV show. He's pretty into the whole Highlander world. He has immersed himself in learning sword styles. He has immersed himself in the katana. A man of a martial arts background was given the chance to play, and he said, I'm here to frickin' play. So much to my surprise, and again, seeing it in this fight scene, Adrian Paul got good. So as the martial arts film freak, I just wanted to pop over to the Unapologetic Geek just to say that this fight scene in Highlander Endgame, Donnie Yen's performance, and even Adrian Paul's performance is a certified banger. However, I will say this movie did make a huge mistake in giving Donnie Yen this small role, because it does not make sense, honestly, watching the end fight scene of this movie, it does not make sense to see Adrian Paul going toe-to-toe and standing on his own against Donnie Yen, only for him to struggle with Purple Lips from Dungeons & Dragons in the end fight. Didn't make sense to me. Donnie Yen just should have been the bad guy the whole time. That would have made a much better movie. I'm going to hand this back over to Eric now. Bye!
Hi, editing Eric here. I just wanted to thank Tristan. He didn't pop in until after I'd already recorded my original video, so I'm just adding this in here to say, go check out the Martial Arts Film Freak channel. If you've been on this channel long enough, you know who he is. You've seen him before. Anyway, I really, really appreciate his support, and I'm glad he was able to say some things about Donnie Yen. I didn't even know he was the stunt coordinator, or whatever it is. He was in charge of the fights. I didn't know that. So anyway, I will now return you to the regularly scheduled program and finish what I had to say about Endgame. Now don't get me wrong, this is still cheap schlock that couldn't be mistaken for a great movie, but I really enjoyed it. I get why people like Adrian Paul and Duncan MacLeod, and maybe one of these days I'll give the television show a whirl. Then again, if the show is anything like this movie, maybe I shouldn't. I definitely overpaid. Highlander: The Source takes place in a dystopian, ruined future, with the remaining immortals on a quest to find some mythical power called the Source, all while the planets are aligning in defiance of natural law. During this quest, a Guardian emerges. He has supernatural speed powers and gets his style choices from Silent Hill. Duncan MacLeod is brought into events by his new ex-wife Anna, who has visions of the Source and wants it so she can make babies with her immortal sugar daddy. So, blah blah blah, it ends with Duncan fighting the Guardian while Anna hangs out at the Source, which is easily found in a random spot in the forest somewhere. This movie feels like it was written in 1 week, filmed over the weekend at the director's house with some green screens in a wooded backyard, and then edited together with some After Effects and a literal garage band who handed over their sound equipment for the chance to cover a Queen song for the big fight scene. If Highlander 2 made Highlander 3 look like Citizen Kane, then this movie makes Highlander 2 look like Casablanca. You see, with Highlander 2, at least it looked like the actors were having a good time, and even if they were coked out of their minds, the filmmakers were at least competent at filmmaking. The filmmakers behind The Source, though... Let me try to put this another way. This was the first of a planned trilogy of Sci-Fi Channel original Highlander films, and it was so bad, even the Sci-Fi Channel decided to slam the brakes. Let that sink in. It's so bad, the same people who kept the Asylum in business didn't want to make any more Highlander movies. Even the fight scenes, which I praised so much in Endgame, are woefully bad, edited together by a blender and splooged on by a bunch of wannabe Matrix CGI. Since I try to stay positive on this channel, let's just move on. And last but not least, we've entered Highlander's anime period. How you feel about this movie will largely depend on your tolerance for anime silliness, and whether or not it means anything to you when I say it was made by the same guy who made Ninja Scroll and Vampire Hunter D. And look, this isn't an anime channel, though I did review Akira that one time, so I'm not going to get too hung up on any of that. Instead, let's look at it as just another Highlander movie. We are once again thrown into a dystopian future, only this time the world truly is in ruins, with New York dominated by a giant golden monument built atop Central Park as the rest of the city is crumbling to dust. Most people have died to a virus, and everybody is under the authoritarian rule of Marcus, an immortal who's been around since at least ancient Rome. In those days, he slaughtered a barbarian clan led by Colin, including murdering Colin's wife by crucifixion. Colin, though, is also an immortal, and spends the next 2,000 years on a search for vengeance. Huh, I guess it really is what it says on the tin. We get lots of flashbacks of Colin meeting up with Marcus, losing to him, and then escaping with his head, usually through increasingly ridiculous bits of dumb luck. At one point, he is adopted into the Clan MacLeod, but that's not all that important. In the future, he meets up with a barely clothed woman who happens to look like his dead wife, and they break into Marcus's tower, she for the vaccine and he for his vengeance. There, they discover that Marcus has created the virus through gain-of-function research. No, Really. Anyway, blah blah blah, Colin loses again, but through a lot of people repeating ad nauseum the theme of the story about the uselessness of vengeance and the importance of life, he decides he has something to fight for and rallies the troops for another attack on the city, where he once again faces off with Marcus. The dystopian future setting is extremely out there, I'll give you that, but story-wise, this feels like what the writer of the original was getting at, with two immortals having a grunge duel across centuries. The villain is also a great foil for the stoic, single-minded Colin, in that he has spent 2,000 years appreciating life, learning new things, making art and poetry, etc. He's a dictatorial psychopath, to be sure, but he is the antithesis to Colin, an immortal who refuses to find a purpose outside of revenge. Like I said, the movie hammers its point into your face a lot, and as such it does feel 20 or 30 minutes too long. Like it said what it had to say in the first hour, but still had 30 more minutes to fill. The resolution is also a bit unsatisfying, but I do love how, through this entire series of movies, the quickening has been getting more and more extreme until, in the climax of this movie, it covers New York like a nuclear bomb. All in all, the search for vengeance is a fun ride that does try to honor the series, assuming you're into anime. So, watching these movies was actually a lot of fun. Well, aside from the source, I think I'd rather never think about that movie ever again. Even setting that one aside though, none of the sequels really hold up to the original. They're all cheesy and most of them look very cheap and amateurish, but there is a lot of love for the franchise that comes through. I'd recommend every fan watch them at least once, but keep your expectations in check. And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. What did you think of the Highlander sequels? I mean, assuming you've actually seen them. Let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching, and until next time, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
God wouldn't let this happen to a true Christian.